welcome back. Last time I talked to you all about backyard gardening, different types and methods of gardening. If you didn't see the last video, I will do just a quick intro again. I am Megan, and typically on my channel I don't focus on gardening. However, it is something that I want to incorporate more because it's something I'm very passionate about and enjoy doing. So I am a mom to 6 kids, and I also homeschool, and I love to cook and bake and all of those things. And so you will find all of those things on my channel. So I would love if you would hit that subscribe button. But let's get back to today's topic, backyard gardening. Specifically, we are going to be chatting about what is a zone, what is the purpose of a zone, and what should you plant. So let's get started. Okay, so a zone. So basically what it is the United States and also Canada has been divided up into what are called zones. A zone is an area in which you live, and it helps give you a better idea about what your climate is like and how that relates to gardening. It gives you insight into what your growing season is like. So I live in East Tennessee, which is specifically where I live, zone 7A. But really pretty close to where I live, there are people who are in 6B. So what does that mean for me? It just basically, it would tell me what my last estimated frost date is. And that's important because when you are planting things that are not frost hardy, you want to be able to know when it is safe to plant those. Things like tomatoes and peppers, things like that that enjoy warmer weather. So within my zone, I can take that information. So say my last frost date is April 29th. I don't even know because I'm not looking at it right now, and I didn't even pay attention to it yet. I just know it's going to be a while before I plant those warmer crop vegetables. But so say I want to know when my last frost date is, and say it's April 29th. So if my last frost date is April 29th, then that means I can safely, more than likely, plant my vegetables that are warmer vegetables. So your tomatoes, your beans, your corn, your peppers, things like that. Those are all your warm, even squash. Those are all your warmer, your warmth loving veggies. Okay. And there's a lot of flowers that are like that as well. Now, before that though, I have a wonderful season of growing cooler crop vegetables. Now, here's the thing. This is what I do when I look at that information. So if my last frost date were to be the end of April, then that tells me that at that point, it's not going to be really cold at night. Okay, obviously. But what that tells me is that I need to start my cooler crop vegetables in early spring. So March. So that's what I've actually been working on right now. If you plant the cooler crop vegetables too late in the spring, then what can happen is once you get into summer, they're going to start bolting, like broccoli can bolt quickly. Lettuces, spinaches, things like that are going to either get bitter or they're going to bolt. Bolt means that they bolt up with little pretty flowers, and that means they're going to seed, and so that vegetable is not harvestable anymore. Or if it is, it's not going to be as prime of a flavor that you want. Like I said, your greens tend to get bitter, like your lettuce tends to get bitter. And at that point, it's not really enjoyable. So you want to make sure that you plant that in, in my case, in early spring. So that's what I've actually been working on. So to find your zone, I will link a couple of different websites down below that you can look for your zone based on your zip code. So you can just click on the link down there. You can type in your zip code. It will give you your zone, and it'll even give you a little blurb about what that means. Okay, it'll give you your last frost date and any other things like that. The next thing that I recommend doing is if you live in an area that has an agricultural extension office or an ag campus, as it's sometimes called, then you more than likely have something available in that area that gives you more insight on when to plant certain things. In East Tennessee, we have the University of Tennessee. They have an ag campus, and for the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I have used their free printable. So they have this really neat little free printable. This is my little gardening notebook that you can print out. And it just has some different pages that, for example, have calendars. So this is March, and it tells you each day. So like March 1st, it says plant or seed lettuce outdoors in West Tennessee. Plant Irish potatoes in West Tennessee. Also direct seed beets. Okay, so I don't live in West Tennessee, so obviously I'm not going to do that. They live in a different zone. It's a little bit warmer sooner out there, and so I don't want to follow that. Early to mid-March is the best time to plant asparagus. They prefer 50-degree soil, and then it has more information that you can look up, so on and so forth. So most agricultural campuses have something like this. The other thing it has is just more info that I can look up about the month. It gives you tasks for the month of April, starting out with strawberries, getting them in the ground, proper fruit planting. So it gives little tips and things like that. So if you live in Tennessee, I will put a link to this down below so you can quickly pull that up. If you don't live in Tennessee, you might want to see if your state has a college that has an agricultural extension. And so that is a great resource to have and to use when knowing when to plant vegetables. Okay, so as far as figuring out what to plant. So in East Tennessee, like I said, I have a pretty long growing season. I can pretty much grow everything except things that grow in extremely warm and humid climates, okay? So even things like watermelon and other melons tend to do really well here. So it's important to keep that kind of stuff in mind. Now, if you do not have a very long growing season, you need to be mindful of that. If you only have 2 to 3 months of really warm weather, then that's going to affect things like peppers, tomatoes, even beans, and certain squash varieties. So you just want to be mindful of how long your growing season is, because on the back of your seed packet, or if you're buying seeds online, it's going to tell you how many days until maturity. Now that's a roundabout average. That means from the time you plant the seed to the time that you actually begin to harvest your fruit. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. So obviously, if you have a pretty short growing season, you don't want to plant something that has an extremely long to maturity date, unless it's something that's a cooler crop, okay? So those are things you want to keep in mind. Now, as far as things to grow as a beginner, so easy things to grow as a beginner. Lettuces, if you plant them when it's cool, not cold, but cool. Lettuces, radishes are very easy, and they only take about 25 to 30 days to maturity, which is really cool, because if you want to grow something just for the fact that you're growing something and you want to be able to harvest it and have that feeling of, I did this, I grew this, that might be a good one to do. Lettuces, radishes, like I said, tomatoes can be pretty easy, especially if you get certain varieties. Beans, green beans. Oh, I love to grow green beans, and those are so easy to grow, especially if it's nice and warm outside. The rattlesnake pole beans, oh my goodness, those are my all-time favorite green beans to grow. All-time favorite. They are so easy to grow. Literally, green beans, you pop them in the ground, make sure that they're nice and watered, and they're more than likely going to do really well for you. Peppers can be pretty easy depending on the variety as well. If you go with just a normal, like if you want to grow jalapenos grow like wildfire. And depending on the variety of bell pepper, those can grow pretty well, but they can also be kind of finicky. Cucumbers, easy to grow for the most part, especially if you plant them straight into the ground. Those are all some pretty quote foolproof things that you can grow. Squash is not that difficult, like your typical just yellow squash and zucchini. It's not that difficult. However, it does take up a lot of space. So that's something you want to keep in mind too, is how much space are these plants going to take. Tomatoes can take up quite a bit of space too, especially if they are what you call indeterminate. So determinate and indeterminate, those are two important words. Determinate means it's determined how big they are. They're more than likely a hybrid. They are only going to grow to a certain size. Indeterminate tomatoes are tomatoes that they sprawl out everywhere and they vine everywhere. And they get huge. They get so huge. So those are things that you want to be mindful of and things you want to look for. So that's the next step. You've decided what type of garden that you're planting if you watched my previous video, and now you're on this one. You've figured out your zone, and now you're deciding what you're going to plant. I also would suggest that you plant something that you know you're going to eat. It's fun to grow things and stuff, but it's even better when it's something you actually enjoy eating. So make sure that you pick something that you're actually going to eat and that you enjoy. So now that you have figured out your gardening method, your zone, all that kind of stuff, and what you're going to plant, then you're going to plant your seeds. So the seed packets that you get give you a lot of information on how to plant. So I am going to be planting these today just as an example. This is a new carrot variety for me. I do like to grow carrots, but I have never done this one, and I'm excited to see how they do. These are from Baker Creek. And so I will link that website down below. I've used them for years and years, but all that to say, so it's going to give you planting instructions. It says carrots require light and fluffy soil in full sun, adequate moisture, but only average fertilizing. Surface sow, press in gently, and provide consistent irrigation. Best in cooler weather. So this is the perfect time for me in zone 7A to begin planting these. So the next thing you can look at also is most seed varieties will give you this information. It sprouts in 12 to 18 days. The ideal temperature is 50 to 75. The seed depth is only an 1/8 of an inch. Plant spacing 2 to 3 inches apart, which a lot of times I wait until they sprout before I worry about how far apart they are. And then it also tells if it's frost hardy or not, which that means, is it going to die if there's a frost, or is it pretty hardy? Is it going to withstand it? So yes, these will. And then a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of full sun a day. Now, as you can see, this bed is in shade right now. Part of it is not. So this bed right here is in full shade in the morning all throughout until you get to the afternoon. And so that is what I'm looking for this bed, because as it warms up outside, I don't want the sun blazing, the afternoon sun blazing down on my beds. So that's the reason why we did these 2 raised beds here this year, is for our lettuce, our salad gardens, basically. So I'm going to do 3 rows of carrots, okay? And so I am just going to be dropping them in there, just kind of probably more like a 1/2 inch apart from each other, because like I said, well, probably more like an inch, maybe 2 inches. I may go ahead and do 2 inches. And then once they sprout, you'll be able to see how many of them sprout, because not all seeds will germinate. You may have some that don't, but for the most part they will, and then you can thin out the ones that you don't want. So a common mistake, especially with carrots, for example, is that you plant too many of these tiny, tiny little seeds too close together, and then you don't get as good of a crop of carrots. So you want to kind of be a little meticulous with these. The same thing with any root vegetable. Same thing with radishes and things like that. You don't want to have them too close together. You want to give them ample room to grow. So I am going to start planting these carrots. You're the rose in a garden. So I hope that you found this video helpful today. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the comments down below. Now, I know I didn't cover every single thing that I could about this topic, so stay tuned for the next video. Push that subscribe button, and I'm going to share some of my favorite seed varieties, some of my go-to grows, and some of them are really easy. Alright, so at this point, what I like to do with carrots is I just like to kind of pat and swish. Pat and swish, that's what I do when I cover them. And just kind of pat them down into the soil, and that usually gets them pretty good. Alright, and the last thing you want to do is you want to make sure that it is well labeled. And this is a garden marker from Haas Seeds. So are my markers, and over here, so I haven't planted anything here yet. I will later. This is radishes and kale. That I love you.